following is a production of Cary TV, the Town of Cary's government access channel.
Call to order the September 9th meeting of the Cary Town Council. And at this time, I'll call on our Mayor Pro Tem for the ceremonial opening.
Thank you, Mayor. If you'd please bow your head in prayer. Dear God, as the anniversary of September 11th approaches, we call on your Spirit to empower us to shape a world marked by ways of life that lead to justice and peace. We are still aware of the fear and the violence that permeated our world in September 11th, 2001. And as we pray in remembrance of that tragic day, help us to be people of nonviolence and hope. Form us into a people determined to heal wounds rather than inflict them. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We now move to item 3 on the agenda, which is the adoption of the agenda. Unless there are changes to the agenda, I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We now move to recognitions, reports, and presentations. Before we go to our first item, I would like to recognize a special guest in the audience. The Cary 101 class is joining us tonight, and this group is comprised of citizens who are interested in learning more about Cary's government. Join me in recognizing the class of Cary 101. Please stand. Thank you so much for being here and for caring about your community. We now move to the manager's update, and I'll call on Manager Stiegel for this update.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. In June, I gave what I hoped would be my last pandemic update. Well, it was the last one, but not the final one, as it turns out. Much to all of our disappointment, my update tonight is about COVID. First, we are aware that both the President and the Governor held news conferences today, and the Emergency Operations Center is assessing how what they said may impact us here in Cary. We'll certainly report back to you on that. As for Cary, the number of town employees who have tested positive for COVID has climbed to 147, which is a 43% increase since my June update, and we're taking appropriate measures in response to that. Interestingly, we've just learned today that our community's vaccination rate is closer to 68%, not 80% as previously reported. Our understanding is that the change occurred because the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services removed duplicate records from their census tract reporting. And Mayor, since your most recent emergency order about indoor masking, our police department has only needed to respond to 6 requests for help with people not wearing masks in businesses, and so far all that have been spoken to have willingly complied. Finally, I want to thank Carrie Harville and Renee Poole for developing the COVID dashboard that now appears in the Council Weekly Report. That concludes my report, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Stiegel. Now's the time for Public Speaks Out. We've included instructions for speaking at this forum on the online and printed agendas. There were 3 opportunities to participate in the Public Speaks Out through written comments, calling in, or attending in person. If you are here in person and would like to speak, I would ask that you take a seat into the rows to my right that are shown as reserved. Public Speaks Out speakers have up to 3 minutes each for their comments, and speakers may speak on any topic as long as it's not a public hearing, and that is to your benefit because you get more time to speak at a public hearing. There's a 3-minute time limit that will be enforced, not to be rude, but to be fair to all of our speakers. There's a timer on the podium. Starts out with a green light. When it turns yellow, that means you have 30 seconds remaining. And when it turns red, that means your time has expired. And if that's the point, where I will interrupt you. Again, not trying to be rude, but trying to be fair. And to have an efficient Public Speaks Out portion of our meeting, we would ask that you please respect that this is a business meeting. Don't applaud or make remarks from your seats or anything else that may distract from this meeting. And to help have an efficient Public Speaks Out, we'll have the clerk summarize written comments first, then we'll call on remote speakers, and this will be followed by those who are joining us in person. So I'll call on Ms. Johnson at this time.
We received one written comment from Laura Palka, who says she, in opposition to the Wellington Park subdivision, rezoning, and asked not to have her neighborhood bothered with this retail space. And we had no remote call-in speakers, and had 3 people sign up to speak prior to the meeting. Our first sign-up speaker in person is Julie Haskett.
Ms. Haskett, please.
Yeah, you can, and you can use this microphone right here.
Okay.
All right. And you can move it closer.
I can move it, I don't know how close it's supposed to be, but anyway. Thank you all. I think I'm one of perhaps two homeowners at Wellington that didn't sign that original petition that went around. And the reason is I felt a lot of the arguments were irrelevant. My dad's a developer, and so many times over the years, he would go to town council and ask for rezoning. And so I've been with him on some of those occasions, and I understand from a developer's point of view as well as a property owner. I think the property owner has the right to sell their property, and I think the homeowners do have a right to be heard. But I think you've heard a lot of arguments that sort of obfuscated what the original point was, and that is that the daycare that was promised is still wanted in that neighborhood. And the property has just become available for the first time in 30-odd years in the middle of a pandemic. And I don't think this is a good time to be building a daycare in the middle of a pandemic, especially one that's affecting children the way it is. I don't know that, that's just my opinion, and I want to give just factual information. But certainly, I don't think there's been enough time for the broker, the property owner, or even the homeowners to be able to reach out and see if there's a potential for a daycare that would be interested in developing that piece of property. And I think it's reasonable to ask for time for that to happen. And that's what I think is important, is to look at the arguments that are reasonable, because you've been given a lot of arguments that I think were not reasonable, and that may make you think that some of the residents have ulterior motives. They just don't want anything built on that corner ever. And even if you believe that, but instead you say, you know what, let's give this some time. Let's wait a year, let the pandemic run its course, hopefully, fingers crossed, and give the broker and even the neighborhood time to see, is it possible for a daycare to be developed in that corner? I think that's a reasonable request. I think it's reasonable for the property owner. I think it's reasonable for the neighborhood. And I think the applicant probably would not like to have to wait a year. But certainly, if I'm sitting in your position, I would want to say, out of all the noise and other arguments that I've heard, what sounds reasonable? And can I lean into supporting the people who elected me in this neighborhood to at least give them that opportunity? and I hope you will. We can come back in a year and say, nope, there's no daycare, or maybe, yeah, we have a daycare. They want a 2-story building and blah, blah, blah. You won't hear a peep from us, I promise, if that happens. But I hope that you'll agree to give us some time to get what was promised to us 30 years ago. And thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker?
Our next speaker is Bailey Bartetto.
Good evening, Mayor Weinbrecht and honorable council members. My name is Bailey Barretto, and I live at 134 Benedum Place in Cary, in Wellington Park. I'm actually the Wellington Park HOA Vice President as well. I've only been a Cary resident for 3 years, moving from Denver, Colorado, but we selected this amazing city based on some of the work that you guys have done to let us know how great it is. We also saw that there is an emerging tech industry, and it's such a family-friendly environment. We spend lots of our time downtown with our dogs, meeting other people, and it's extremely enjoyable. We settled into a beautiful home in the Wellington Park community as it was affordable, had a secluded feel. There was trees lining the property, which is unusual for, the newer developments, and the neighborhood was truly tight-knit. We absolutely love where we live. We're planning to start a family soon, just like so many in our neighborhood have done, and we enjoy being able to walk and talk to the neighbors and get about very easily in the neighborhood because it's so nice and tight and quiet. Our neighborhood is going through a revitalization where the original families within the community have changed, and now young families are moving in. And I can think of about 75 families within our community that have children under the age of 5 who require full-time care. Currently, it's the rule of thumb that as soon as you pass the 12-week mark of pregnancy, that you have to select your daycare and secure your spot with a deposit, as there are very long waiting lists. When we were looking at homes to purchase, our realtor mentioned that the front section of our neighborhood was zoned for a daycare, and that definitely swayed our decision for purchase. With the fast-growing community and the near requirement for both parents to work to make a livable wage, daycare is of utmost importance. Even in the North Carolina General Assembly, childcare reform is a hot topic in reference to House Bill 547. Childcare is a huge unmet need in our nation and specifically in our area. We have long waiting lists for affordable childcare in our state, and childcare is truly infrastructure to make sure that our society continues to progress. Taking a piece of land that was meant to be childcare for 35 years, as we know, but it was just recently sold or available for selling, would be a negative impact to Cary residents. The community has spoken through petitions, letters, and public forums that our neighborhood needs childcare, and now the property is up for sale. It should finally be developed to support our community as planned. I would like to call action to the Cary City Council to please vote against this rezoning proposal and leave the aforementioned property zoned for a daycare. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Melissa Pasquinelli.
Good evening, and thank you to the City Council for giving me the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I'm Dr. Melissa Pasquinelli, and I do oppose this rezoning in Wellington Park. I want to be clear from the start that I'm not opposed to development on this parcel. I'm excited about all the many changes in Cary, and I really thank all of you for all the work you've done to make this a really great city to live in. We live on the other side of the development, away from this parcel. In fact, we're on Durrington Place, and some of you may remember that the rezoning happened way back on to Piney Plains. There was rezoning a few years ago to change that. That's in our backyard. You did not see me here then because I did not oppose that development, even though I lost all that privacy in our backyard. Why I didn't oppose it is because it stayed for its intended purpose, being residential. What the rezoning was then was changing from a single home to 23 townhomes.
And so, again, not opposed to the development. I'm here, though, to express my opposition for two distinct reasons. First of all, I think this rezoning request is so far removed from its intended purpose. It was zoned initially for a daycare facility, and its current request to be a large mixed-use facility for a space that's situated between the beautiful park that you all helped to build, Mara Durrell Kids Park, as well as a residential one. It's just not the right fit for that space. Secondly, we chose to move to Cary 9 years ago because we were planning to start a family, and Cary was where we wanted our family to thrive and grow up. We chose Wellington Park for the same reason that Bailey said, because we heard that there was going to be a daycare facility there. Well, it hasn't happened, unfortunately, but hopefully that can happen in the future. I do have a little one at home, so I do recognize the need for a daycare. I'm disappointed that a daycare hasn't been developed there yet. And I also know firsthand on how hard it is to find quality daycare in the area. There's just a lack of spaces, and we really do need a daycare in this space. I'll also say I had a staff member this week just almost quit on us because she cannot find daycare facilities for her infant. And so, again, there is a huge need for a child care facility, and we could use this space for that. So to conclude, I do hope you vote against this rezoning, and I really appreciate all of you for listening, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Any other signed-in speakers?
That was our last signed-up speaker.
Okay, I'll open it up to those who have not signed up in advance. Those who would like to speak at Public Speaks Out, please approach at this time. Anyone?
I get to announce myself? Okay, yeah. Great. Good evening, and thank you for your time. My name is Grace Pertell, and I live in Wellington Park and have for the past 5.5 years. Although I am one person, imagine 6 families behind me with 10 kids. And that's just on our street alone. I am representing the Hoofnagel family, the Dorius family, the Lobrato family, the Watts family, and of course my own. There's 10 kids among us, ages 6 and under. The reason that they are not here is not because they do not want to be, but because 6:30 is the most challenging time for working families with young kids. You spent so much time leaving your job, commuting, and then having a second commute to then go pick up your children, heaven only knows where, to then come home. This additional commute time drastically cuts into the very few hours you have with your young kids before you're busy making dinner and then starting their bedtime routine. But there can be a different way. Each of you hold the power to gift these families with young children the most precious resource, which is time. By denying this rezoning request, families would have only one commute to worry about. What a gift it would be to swing by and pick up your kids and be home in less than 2 minutes. I have 2 little ones at home, sorry. And also a working mother. That would free up so much extra margin to catch up on each other's days. Maybe do a family walk after dinner, or just let kids be kids and play. You have the opportunity this evening to help build stronger families while also reducing the greatest burden for them. What a win and what a gift. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak at Public Speaks Out?
Greetings, Town of Cary and Town Council. My name is Dr. Brandon Smith, and I speak tonight on behalf of myself and my wife, Dr. Larissa Stanley. This is in reference to the Wellington Park PDD amendment to Parcel C2. Our business is Smith Family Dental Solutions. We're a family-owned dental practice ran to treat our community's families. We're located at 301 Keisler Drive here in Cary. We have an opportunity to develop a parcel of land that since 1988 was zoned solely as a nursery school. Prior to this meeting, we met with investors who specialize in these very types of businesses. The consensus is that the parcel was simply too small to develop as a daycare. The smallest daycare that would be developed would be an 8,000 square foot building that would need an additional 10,000 square foot area for our kids to play. Factoring in today's standards for parking, stormwater management, and setbacks on both sides of the property on the corner, it simply would not fit, and therefore likely the property will remain undeveloped in perpetuity. Your staff has worked hard with this council and for the community by remaining diligent and objective throughout this entire process. They've conducted an in-depth evaluation and find that the request is consistent with the Imagine Cary community plan. They went as far as obtaining and interpreting traffic study data which would support our rezoning. Our proposed use would create 1/3 of the traffic at peak hours for the surrounding neighborhoods. If safety is a concern, this is a significantly safer traffic situation than a daycare as presently zoned. During the neighborhood meeting, which there were 72 attendants, we heard concerns about lighting and specific uses. We provided tighter restrictions than what is presently allowed. After the public hearing, we heard concerns from the council about specific uses, specifically the broadcast studio. We removed these. In addition, architectural concerns were brought up. Again, we modified to increase the streetscape buffer, and we limited certain building materials. The environmental impact, which we care deeply about, would become a moot point if this parcel were developed, as all water, woodland, and environmental considerations would be managed according to predetermined town standards. Furthermore, the PZB, again appointed by council, has voted unanimously that this request is consistent with the Imagine Cary community plan. Simply put, a daycare at this location isn't the highest and best usage of this property. The stricter requirements we volunteered for our proposed building make our proposal a good use and a far more positive aesthetic impact on the neighborhood than the daycare. I hope you refer to and rely on these established facts and objectively considering what is truly best for this parcel of land. We greatly look forward to being a part of this community and neighborhood for years to come. We've cherished our 5 years working in and for this community thus far. In summary, we ask you to approve our request for the Wellington Park PDD amendment. I thank you all for your time. We're available for any questions after.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, council members. I did not intend to talk tonight, but I really cannot let misrepresentation
Could you
go.
give us your name, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, certainly. I thought you might have recognized me from so many times being up here. My name is Lynn Yanyo, and I live at 310 West Kirkfield Drive in the Wellington subdivision. And I'm also on the HOA board. We had the opportunity to meet with the person who would like to have this rezoned, Mr. Smith. He met with us on Tuesday, and I understand he sent you all an email, which we were able to get a copy of through records request, which misrepresented that evening. That evening was recorded, should you want to have the actual data in front of you, because he speaks to the facts, but let's make sure that we really have facts. When asked specifically, have you done any research to understand whether or not this property could be developed as a daycare, he said no. He had talked to one daycare company, completely that was it. And he said he's never looked at it, and he hadn't intended to. So we did over the last 24 hours. We were able to find 6 daycares, some run by very large companies and some were small, that all resided on properties that are less than 1.06 acres. One daycare is successful and it's on 0.28 acres. So it's quite possible to build a daycare on less than an acre. All of these daycares, as you heard from the women who are trying to find places for their children to go, are overbooked. There is not a spot, and if you're looking for infant care, you need to be looking for that the minute you found out that you're pregnant. So there is a wealth of opportunity to put a daycare in that will be completely filled and be successful. Now, will it be as profitable as a dental office? Perhaps not. I think that might be very true that you could make a lot of money as a dental office, but I don't think that's what we really should be talking about here, because our community needs a daycare, and a daycare is viable and would be valuable to us, and we should do that. Another misrepresentation is that he suggested that we in Wellington Park fought the Kids Together, which was the original name of the park, the Kids Together Park. We did not fight it. In fact, we have a member of our community that has a special needs child that worked closely with the town of Cary to develop that park. We have always been supportive of development and areas that we can do that. We've had people speak to that. So please don't misrepresent us as people that don't want to see change or development. We do. We just really need daycare in this area, and we just can't imagine now, after waiting this long, to be at this close of a point and not have it. We have been in contact with people that are willing to develop it into daycare, but it's no longer available. In fact, a person today tried to put a bid on the property who would develop it into daycare for us, and they were rejected because the property is already under contract. So thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate all of your open minds and all of the time you have spent listening to us. We really do thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak at the public speaks out portion of our meeting?
Hello. My name is Tony Puccio. I live at 105 Kirkfield Drive in Cary, North Carolina, Wellington subdivision. I'd like to thank the mayor and the council for letting all of us speak tonight at Public Speaks Out. I'm speaking tonight on 21 REZ 04, Wellington Park. The time that you provide us tonight is very important to every single one of us. It's the last chance we have to look all of you guys in the eye and let you hear the voices of everyone in our community and realize how important this decision is to all of us. The council and the staff have certainly given us their time through several in-person as well as Zoom meetings, and we thank all of you for your thoughts, questions, and time. And we've learned a lot through this process. I'd like to quickly revisit just a couple figures as far as our neighborhood's thoughts are concerned. There's over 375 signatures on our neighborhood's petition opposing this request. That's 98% of the single-family homes and 83% of the entire community. As it's been stated, we've also provided several examples of local daycares that in fact do sit on less than 1.08 acres, the size of the property. So it can work. What we're asking very simply is give the property a chance to become what it was intended to be. Give it a chance to prove the initial town plan and the initial transference marked as future daycare to our PPD correct. The property was listed for sale in the middle of a global pandemic, a crazy and challenging time for all of us, and it still is. Voting no allows this property time to develop as a positive addition to the families here and to those families we hope to attract to this community. You're all familiar with Dr. Smith's email stating he'd develop the property regardless of rezoning. Keeping the current zoning could provide our community a chance to work together with Dr. Smith on the development of a property as the daycare and aftercare, a drop-in, a track-out, all kinds of potential if it stays zoned the way it is. Everyone embracing that change. So again, to keep our spirit clear, what we're asking is give it a chance to do what it was supposed to do. Please keep the original zoning in effect. Voting no is the only way to not look back and wonder if the right decision was made. Voting no provides the only opportunity for this property to be developed as what it was dreamed up to be. A perfectly complementary space for children and family in ours and neighboring developments to grow and learn and grow up. And now at this point in our older, more established community, an undeniable value addition to reinvigorate and attract younger families into Wellington Park. Please don't take away the opportunity this property has at becoming a daycare. Please believe in the initial designation and the plan for this property. The zoning does not need to be corrected before it's ever been given a chance to be proven right. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak at this public speaks out portion of the meeting? Anyone at all? Seeing no one, will close the public speaks out portion of the meeting. Now we'll move on to our next item, which is the consent agenda. For the benefit of people watching our meeting on TV, I'm going to take a moment to review the consent agenda items. Please keep in mind that one vote approves all of these items. On the consent agenda, we have minutes, amendment to Cary-Morrisville utility agreement, adjustment to adopted meeting schedule. Would council members like any of these items pulled for discussion from the consent agenda? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make that motion.
There's a motion.
Second.
And a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and that takes us to public hearings. Same rules apply for public hearings that apply for public speaks out, with one exception. Speakers now have 5 minutes instead of 3 for their comments. Our first and only public hearing tonight is 19 REZ 33, which is at 3012 Holly Springs Road rezoning. Associate Planning Director Deborah Grannon will introduce the item. Council will not take action on this item this evening. It will be referred to our Planning and Zoning Board for their review and recommendation, and will return to us at a future meeting. Ms. Grannon.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. For your consideration this evening is a request to rezone a 28-acre parcel located at 3012 Holly Springs Road. Cary initiated this request in cooperation with the property owner, the North Carolina Department of Transportation. The subject property is located a quarter of a mile south of Lily Atkins Road, adjacent to Holly Springs Road. The site is vacant, and it will remain vacant because the land is located entirely within a floodplain. NCDOT designated the subject property as a mitigation site, specifically named the Spate Branch Wetland Mitigation and Stream Restoration Site. Cary annexed this property, shown in green, into our corporate limits in May of this year, and it was in association with the Lily Atkins assemblage, shown in pink to the north. We annexed this property because it's considered intervening property, and as provided by state law, can be used to make the land that was part of the rezoning request contiguous to Cary's corporate limits. That's not uncommon. We've done that before, but typically you see that with right-of-way rather than with such a large land area. So now that the property is annexed, the next step is for Cary to assign a zoning district. And staff has proposed resource recreation. The RR district intends to protect important natural resources, watersheds, and water supplies. And since the property is located entirely within a floodplain, it does create an important natural resource for habitat protection and flood mitigation. In our preliminary analysis of the request against the Imagine Cary Community Plan, we find that the Engage and Shape chapters are applicable. Cary's Future Growth Framework Map designates the site as traditional neighborhood and stresses the importance of open space, parks, greenways, and places for passive recreation. The plan also states that the RR zoning district is an appropriate zoning district to accomplish this goal. The site is not proposed to be a park. The closest developed park is the Jack Smith Park, located approximately 1 mile southwest of the site. Our Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Facilities Master Plan identifies the Swift Creek Greenway corridor extending from Lily Atkins Road along the northeast portion of the site. Cary proposes a grade-separated crossing of the Holly Springs Road, but that's going to require extensive coordination with NCDOT at some point in time in the future. And at this time, we have not allocated any funding or design or proposed construction of that project. Staff facilitated a neighborhood meeting virtually on February 5th of 2020, and that was in conjunction with the Lily Atkins Road rezoning. There were about 100 people in attendance. Most of their questions pertain to the Lily Atkins case, but they did have questions about the process, what the RR zoning meant, what the state regulations were, and of course they had concerns about flooding and floodplain. Since then, we've just had one phone call. It was from Wake County. They just wanted to have a better understanding of how the property might be used in the future. Staff notified property owners within 800 feet of the subject property, which exceeds state and LDO requirements. And this concludes the presentation, and I'm available for your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Grannon. So now is the time for the public hearing for 19 REZ 33, which is at 3012 Holly Springs Road, and I would invite, I'll call on our town clerk to see if we had any written comments and call in speakers first.
Okay, we had one written in comment. It was for Penelope Hornsberry, and she wrote in saying that the designations should focus on the protection of open space and protection of watershed. And we had no remote speakers and nobody signed up to speak.
Okay. So now is the time for the public hearing, like I said, and I would invite speakers forward if they would like to speak on this topic. Anyone to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, will close this public hearing, and I'll open it up to council members for questions or comments.
Easiest rezoning ever.
Yeah.
Open space, yeah, that works.
Well, this is, if you all recall, back when we were considering the development of land to the north, there's a lot of history out there with those folks that live in the county, and that some of that history is about broken trust, or perceived to be broken trust. So I view this as just kind of legitimizing everything that's been promised, and I think this should help build those relationships, and it should help improve things out there that we're doing this. It kind of is now documented to what it is and what it'll remain. So
Thank you.
I'm happy to see it happening.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any other thoughts, comments? This will go to our Planning and Zoning Board. They're going to review it and see how it fits the Cary Community Plan. They'll make a recommendation, and it'll come back to us at a future date. Thank you, Ms. Grannon.
Thank you.
We now move to discussion items. Our first discussion item is the bid award and transfer of funds for Cary Tennis Park, yay, Phase 2 Lighting Bleacher Improvement Project. And Capital Planning and Facilities Director Alex Jones, who's making her first appearance in front of the council, will present this item tonight. Ms. Jones, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight with a great update on the Cary Tennis Park Bleacher Improvements Project. Originally built in 2002, this 19-acre site includes trails, a pro shop, locker rooms, comfort stations, 4 pickleball courts, 32 championship tennis courts, and not enough seats. These amenities are enjoyed by our citizens daily, and the tennis park's national reputation allows us to host people from across the country for large collegiate events and tournaments. Recognizing this excellence, the United States Tennis Association named it one of their featured facilities in 2019. Popular tournaments draw as many as 2,000 people daily, which results in standing room only, such as this crowd from a couple of years ago, frequent occurrence during tournaments. And recognizing the regional economic benefits from these tournaments, you, Council, and Wake County adopted an interlocal agreement in 2018 to share costs for seating improvements. Phase 1 of the project added 681 seats to the stadium courts and was completed in 2020. Phase 2, shown here in the yellow circle, will add 432 bleacher seats to the 6 adjacent courts, increase ADA accessible seating, and replace aging storm drains underneath the project area. We reserved the bleachers through a cooperative purchasing agreement and bid the remaining work to contractors in June. PGA Construction was the low bidder by a considerable amount, but due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we continue to see materials and labor costs driving high bid prices. And unfortunately, the total package has come in about $200,000 over budget. The storm drains are nearing 20 years old and need to be replaced before we put something on top of it. The bleachers and installation are a specialty service we can't do ourselves. Under the circumstances, we're confident that we've gotten the best pricing available to us. Now, why am I showing you a picture of Penny Road School Park? This is a good news update after all, and this project recently completed refurbishing fields, trails, fences, sidewalks, and restrooms at the park. Thanks to excellent work by project manager Matt Wetherall and a team of public works staff led by Jimmy Simpson, we were able to work with the contractor to save about $200,000 and complete the project under budget. As such, staff recommends that council reallocate $210,000 in funding from the Penny Road Park project to the Tennis Park Bleachers project, authorize the purchase of the bleachers, and award the construction contract to PGA Construction for a total project cost of $624,338. Thank you, and I'm here to take your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. And As she said, and as I will emphasize, this facility is becoming nationally known. I went up to New York 2 years ago to accept a national award for this facility. We're having our second professional tournament next week. And so we're getting a lot of attention. And to keep this ball rolling, to keep this momentum going forward, we have to make improvements. And this is essential, as Ms. Jones stated. So I wholeheartedly am behind these improvements, and more you'll hear about later. But this is a great use of funds. We had a savings at one park, and we're moving it to another park where it's desperately needed. And I think it's a great idea. So other thoughts, questions?
Great comments.
Yeah.
Really appreciate staff being so forward-thinking and recognizing that the storm drains and stuff underneath being 20 years old, it makes absolutely no sense to cover them up with a bunch of pretty stuff to only have to dig them back up in a few years to fix the storm drains, similar to what we're doing over on the Black Creek Greenway, doing everything and at the same time, save costs and reduce the pain. So I really appreciate that. The question I have, this is phase 2. What's phase 3? What's phase 4? And to Harold's, the mayor's point, this is becoming a more nationally known, we're going to have even bigger and better tournaments in the future. Are we already planning on phase 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever there might be? And if so, should we be doing that sooner than later? I mean, just help me out with that if you can.
Yes, sir. As the mayor alluded to, there are improvements that we are looking at now specific to lighting for tournament play. A master plan was previously done for the facility in 2016, I believe, and we're always looking at that for future updates, particularly with an eye toward maintaining the national reputation and ability to host these important events.
But as far as additional seats being installed elsewhere, yes, soon, later?
I can provide that information to you.
Yeah, I can help with that a little bit because it's even so recent that Alex isn't aware. But the mayor was reached out to by the United States Tennis Association. Is that the
So
government?
there's a USTA official at the last professional tournament, and I know a lot of the tennis folks, and he knew me, and he came up to me and bent my ear for an hour.
Yeah.
And he told us succinctly what we need to do to get to the next level, and it is something we can do. So I met with the tournament director after the tournament, and I talked with Doug a little bit, and then I gave the information to Sean. I said, this is coming from somebody who has a big passion for tennis, so you got to take it with a grain of salt, but please proceed forward in how this may go. And that's kind of where we are.
Yeah. We have a meeting coming up with them to better understand, not only, we understand it's used from a tennis perspective pretty well, but how it could be used by the community year-round is when it's not in use for a tournament facility for the council.
I think there's a big opportunity for that. We really do. Not only for people that like tennis, people that like anything, yoga, I don't know.
Right, well, what I was getting at is, doing this is awesome, love it, helps us better meet needs, but, are we not doing enough right now? I mean, should we be doing more right now, is, I guess.
In my opinion,
I think what we're doing right now is a good idea. I do think, and it's so early, I'll have a better sense of it, that the potential for expanding the tennis park makes a lot of sense, from not only from an economic development perspective, but also from a community use perspective. It seems no different than our conversations about the community recreation facility, that if we were to build any rec facility or expand any rec facility, it would be used. There's just so much demand for our quality of life amenities, not only from more the national kind of interest, but outsiders, if you will, but also from the community. So I think we'll probably be able to get back to you on that at the next quarterly meeting.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
So expand, meaning you will consider increasing the number of courts?
Number of courts, the quality of some of the courts, build locker rooms, to have and frankly, I should turn over to the mayor because I've learned more from the mayor about this than anybody, but to get our tournaments up to the next level. So if you use, I can use like a baseball example, go from AA to AAA, you have to expand the offerings. So the locker rooms, the tournaments are bigger, have more spectators, you have to accommodate for more media access, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Mayor, how did I do?
That's pretty good, and I'll give you an idea of where we are, especially with that one we got in the summer. We are at the lowest number of points. They play for points, and we're in between two big points. And so if we can get middle, where the point's worthwhile, some of these guys, rather than sitting out a week, will come. And when they do, that'll fill up the stadium. And so it's worthwhile for us to consider doing the things it takes to get us to that next level. Some of the things are called tension courts. I don't want to go into too much detail. Better lighting. That ticket, I'm guessing, will be $500,000. That's not insane. We would get that back in economic benefit. But the buildings we're talking about, that's a different story, and you'd have to think about that in phases and how it can be used in the community other than tennis tournaments and stuff like that. And that's a whole new ballgame and discussion. But I think in the next quarterly, we'll probably get the very next step, which is probably the lighting and the tension courts, I'm guessing. I don't know. We haven't talked yet. So I've just sent information, and Alex might not know any of this. I don't know what she knows, but I've sent it to Sean. So this is very preliminary.
I haven't told many people yet.
Yeah, so I've just,
So,
But now
here's
you
your update.
I am learning some of this from Sean as you are, but I do know that we are currently looking at the lighting.
okay, cool. We'll get on the same page
Oh, yeah.
before we get to the
Well, many,
quarterly.
many,
It's
many
breaking
parts of the
news.
machine.
It's breaking
Yeah.
news.
Yeah. It's all exciting.
Okay, Jack?
Thank you, Alex. And thanks to Matt Weatherall for his work that helped us save that money.
He's great. Really enjoy working with him. We're lucky to have him.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, this is a bit of a sidebar conversation, but as we move those funds from the Penny Road Park, we have some growing pain issues out there with egress, ingress. I want to make it clear to the folks that this transfer of funds does not get in the way of all the reviews that we're doing regarding the logistics of, where the staging areas for the students and things that are going on Etterly Drive and all that. Those things continue as before. So this is not a takeaway to those other issues. So I just want to make that clear. This is a standalone by itself. That's it.
So unless there are any other questions, comments, I would entertain a motion to the staff request.
I'll make a motion that we approve the transfer of $210,000 from the Penny Road Park Improvements Project to the Cary Tennis Park Phase 2 lighting bleachers. I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. Further discussion?
We need a
Wait,
little
do
bit.
I need- And the award
Yeah, need a
contract.
little bit more
Sorry.
to the motion. And you can move to adopt staff's recommendation if that would be easier, but there are a couple of
Wait, she
pieces
said,
towards
I'll
it.
move to accept staff's recommendation.
Move
I'll
to-
amend my second.
And amend the second. So we have a motion and a second that's approved by our attorney. And further discussion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Alex. Ms. Jones, sorry. Okay, we now move to our second discussion item. 21 REZ01, Tower View Court PDD rezoning, Act 19 Comprehensive Plan Amendment. And once again, Associate Planning Director Deborah Grannon will give a report, and council may take action. Ms. Grannon.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the request to rezone approximately 26 acres at 330 Tower View Court, and it's also the opportunity for you to amend the Comprehensive Plan Future Growth Framework Map. The subject property is zoned industrial, shown in purple. The applicant proposes Planned Development District Major. The PDD zoning district is one that allows the opportunity for the applicant to introduce flexibility and innovative design standards. The PDD that was proposed, Tower View PDD, proposes 560 dwelling units consisting of 130 townhomes, 430 multifamily units, 10,000 square feet of commercial, which is limited to retail, convenience store, restaurant, assembly, financial institution, and personal service, 4 acres of open space, including buffers, and community gathering space provided at 10,000 square feet, which is twice the size required by the LDO. Since the Town Council public hearing, the applicant has removed the request to reduce the townhome width. The LDO standard is 20 feet. Initially, they proposed 16. They have removed that request. They've also added a commitment to remove the existing radio towers prior to applying for a building permit, and they removed the request for a drive-through use. The applicant proposed pedestrian connections on James Jackson Avenue and also offered several pedestrian-related improvements at the intersection of Northwest Cary Parkway and James Jackson Avenue, and offered to provide 2 electrical vehicle charging stations. The Planning and Zoning Board heard the request on July 26th and recommended that the plan be consistent with both the Act amendment and the proposed rezoning. Since that meeting, the applicant has come back and provided an additional commitment to 6 electric vehicle charging stations. The growth framework map designates the site currently as Business Industrial Park. So in order to be consistent with the Imagine Cary Community Plan, staff has proposed traditional neighborhood for the future growth framework map, which supports this predominantly residential use. So in looking at that amendment to the comprehensive plan and looking at policies in the live, work, shape, and move chapter, staff finds that the rezoning is consistent with those multiple policies. So our recommendation is that because there is a fundamental change in the assumptions on which that plan was first developed, and that there's a new opportunity not foreseen with the original plan, that we recommend approval of the comprehensive plan and also the rezoning. There's multiple details about other commitments that the applicant has offered and modifications included in the staff report, and we have reserved slides if you have any questions about any of those. The applicant is present tonight also in the event you have any questions. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Grannon. Ms. Bush, I know you had comments you wanted to make on this one.
Yeah, I do want to say that to start with, I think it's great that this land became available because it is right between 3 major, what I call, employment centers, the Target area, which is in Forestville, the O2, where the O2 Fitness is now, which was the Steinmart, which I think is also Morrisville, and then across the street, which I think is Cary, where the old Panera used to be. I'm using all the old ones. So I do think it is an opportunity. Yet I do still have some issues with it, which I certainly shared with the applicant. I think it's quite dense. This new format of courtyards is still yet unknown and untested here. I know those always have to start somewhere. And those buildings are awfully close in some areas and quite tall, potentially creating a cavernous feeling in some of the areas. And the parking's a little odd. I wish that this were a little bit different. I wish it had structured parking as offered by the applicant, would be offered by the applicant, as many of our later apartment buildings have been. All the parking is on the fringes, which I think also reduces the look and feel of it. We're seeing more buildings pulled to the street and the parking in the back. So is it bad? No. But is it as good as I think it could be and should be, given that it's a Preston development? And I know we're not supposed to consider the applicant. I wish it were better. So I'm leaning towards not approving.
Okay. Other comments? I'll give my comments. I think multifamily is an appropriate use here, and if you've watched the last several council meetings, I beg people to put in some mix of types, housing types, especially ownership, and I got what I asked for. So I think that's wonderful. Getting to Jennifer's comments about the density helps with affordable housing. I love the fact that it may or may not be affordable. Affordable is a relative term, but the fact that there's opportunity for ownership here is very encouraging to me. So I'm very excited to see that. And so I'm going to support this proposal. And those are my thoughts. I know I talked with Mr. Urha about height concern, and I talked with staff as well.
What do you think, Ed?
And I don't know if they have something to share about the height, how much, and maybe the applicant could come
Sure.
forward and speak about the height.
Yeah,
as
I can
in
pull up
relative-
a picture the applicant provided,
Okay.
and the applicant can
Wonderful.
speak to that if you'd like.
Yeah, that was my only concern, that due
Right.
to the height increase, that it would appear out of scale with the surrounding developments. But I was very much looking forward to seeing your pictures.
Yeah, the applicant is present if you have any questions for them Sorry, they have provided a rendering, conceptual design rendering. Then they've provided images showing what the proposed buffers and existing and proposed views would look like from Cary Parkway. And then proposed rendering showing, what the site would look like from James Jackson. So there is extensive vegetation now between the site and Cary Parkway. And they are looking at varying heights, maximum height. I'll find the information on what's proposed for the townhomes. They are tall, but in terms of the scale, I think the size of the site seems to help mitigate with that.
Mr. Urha, you have questions for the applicant? or-
Appreciate seeing the pictures. I
Okay.
can't believe the buildings are behind those trees. You don't see anything.
Pretty cool. Other comments, questions?
I would just echo your comments. I think the use here makes sense. I think it's also desperately needed in regards to the commercial across the street on the other side of James Jackson. Especially with Park West being just up the road. I mean, that site has struggled tremendously, both in retail and restaurant uses. I think having some, a little dense development across the street that's walkable, I think that would be a great addition for them as well. I think the architecture's great, the conditions are good, the trees, the buffering, I think it's all adequate. And then this is also going in a predominantly industrial area, so I think that's a huge upgrade, And as we've all talked about, yeah, you're getting rid of the towers, which, okay, I didn't really mind the towers, honestly. You kind of, once you've seen them 10 times, you don't ever see them again. But, I think this is a much better use of the land, and I'm looking forward to supporting it.
Any other comments, thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with Don. I mean, this is a much better use of the land than what we had before. And I like the mix of uses, and to the point that you've already said, I think it's, we have to look at the fact that if we have too few units of housing, we're going to exacerbate the affordable housing issue here.
Any other comments? Or are we ready for a motion?
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we adopt the following documents attached to the online agenda: the resolution to amend the Imagine Cary Community Plan, the statement of consistency for 21 RAZ01 Tower View Court PDD rezoning attached to this motion, and rezoning ordinance 21 RAZ01.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Motion passes 6-1. Thank you, Ms. Granite.
Thank you.
We now move to our next discussion item, 21 RAZ04 Wellington Park PDD Amendment Parcel C2. Senior Planner Aaron Puckett will give a report. Council may take action. Ms. Puckett.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. This is a request to rezone approximately 1 acre located at 301 Wellingborough Drive. And as you may recall, you held a public hearing for this request at your June 10th meeting. The site is located at the northwest corner of Thurston Drive and Wellingborough Drive. Residential portions of Wellington Park surround the site to the north and east, and the Wellington Park Shopping Center is just south of the site. The Marla Durrell Park and Kids Together Playground are located about 500 feet to the west. The parcel is currently zoned Planned Development District Major, or PDD Major, and is in the Wellington Park PDD. It's currently zoned for a daycare use, and the applicant proposes to amend the PDD. The proposed amendment specifically modifies parcel C2 of Wellington Park. The original PDD zoned this parcel for a nursery school use, or what we would define today as a daycare under the current LDO. And the proposed amendment would change the use to office uses, including business or professional office, and wellness center. The radio or television broadcasting studio use has been removed from consideration since the public hearing. Additional conditions include limiting the maximum building size to 10,000 square feet, and specifically limiting any wellness center use to 5,000 square feet, which is also a new condition since the public hearing. Limiting the building height to a maximum of 2 above-grade stories. Limiting on-site light poles to a maximum height of 25 feet, which is 12 feet below the maximum height allowed per the LDO.
and providing a 30-foot wide Type A streetscape along the property frontage on both Thurston Drive and Wellingborough Drive. The applicant has also provided a number of architectural conditions since the public hearing, and these include prohibiting the use of stucco or ephes in the building facade, limiting the roof type and materials to prohibit clay tile and mansard or gambrel roof forms, limiting certain materials such that they would not be visible from the street, and prohibiting fabric awnings. And as a reminder, the applicant also proposed one modification, which would be the ability to locate the building at the rear of the site. As a reminder, the LDO typically requires building at intersections of thoroughfares or collectors to be located at the intersection with parking behind. However, given the increased streetscape plantings, the reduced light pole heights, and the location adjacent to a residential neighborhood, this modification could be justified. Staff found the request to be consistent with the Imagine Cary community plan and recommend approval. We found that the request supports several work policies in supporting an existing Cary business while also providing an opportunity for additional small businesses. The subject property is a small infill site, and the proposed office would provide a logical use transition between the larger shopping center to the south and the residential neighborhood to the north and east. The increased buffer and limitations on building materials and roof forms help ensure some aspects of the aesthetics of the development. The traditional neighborhood designation also supports small non-residential uses when located on the edge of residential areas. At their meeting in July, the Planning and Zoning Board found the request to be consistent with the Imagine Cary Community Plan by a vote of 9-0. And with that, this concludes my presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions. The applicant and the applicant's representative are also present this evening if you have questions for them.
Thank you, Ms. Puckett. I can tell you that this council has received a lot of feedback on this one, and I'm sure we all have our own thoughts and opinions, so I'll go ahead and get mine out of the way. I can tell you I've been on both sides of this argument. I've been for it, I've been against it. So one of the emails said, would you want a dentist office located next to your house? And I'm like, yeah, actually I would. I mean, I really would. Would I want a daycare? Well, I'm an old curmudgeon. No, but that's not the question that in my mind that I'm trying to answer. The question in my mind, is there a compelling reason to change this? So that's where I've been focused. And first of all, can a daycare go there? Yes, a daycare can go there. However, if you look at the last few daycares that have been approved in Cary, and staff provided me this information, over the last several months, then there's not any that are that size. They're all larger, and they all require outdoor space. Is there a possibility for that to happen? Sure. So that's weighing on my mind. And then another one, I heard a comment, well, this has been for sale for 35 years or whatever it is, and nothing's happened so far, so nothing's going to happen. Well, I had staff look into that as well, and the activity has started within the last year. So there's potential that something could happen with a smaller daycare. And so it's a tough call for me. Right now, is there a compelling reason? Pretty close. But what is the residents, what do the residents want? Well, they wanted to give us a chance to see if it could be a daycare. Honestly, I'm not sure it can be with today's standards, but I'm willing to give it that time. And so this is a tough one for me, but I'll have to vote against it to allow the possibility for daycare. Now, if I see another proposal come in a year or two from now, and then I might have to go with that. But for right now, I agree with the residents that there should be time, and we should have the possibility of a daycare. I'll agree with that. So those are my opinions and my thoughts and my process through arriving where I am, and I would be glad for my colleagues to give their opinions at this time.
I want to follow up on Mayor's comment, and I think this case provides a very unique scenario that it was initially zoned as a daycare using the old standards, but it's challenging now for the new standards. So I mean, might be the question for our staff. If we do allow a daycare to develop, would we have to relax our standards in order to fit into the original zoning? How would that work? Or using the current standards, that a daycare wouldn't be able to work?
Current standards always
It's
have to
like-
be met.
Yeah.
That's correct, unless the PDD specifically asked for modifications to standards, and a PDD could not ask for a modification to stormwater mitigation standards. So they would still have to mitigate to a 100-year storm event. But in terms of anything else like buffers, building height, parking, unless the PDD specifically reduces what the LDO allows, then they have to meet the LDO standards.
Thank you.
Other thoughts, comments?
Do you have any other follow-ups?
Oh,
Yeah, so, I mean, initially, when I heard about this rezoning case, I mean, I could see arguments from the both sides, like, would I want a dental office right by my neighborhood? Yes, I would. Would I like a daycare? Yes, I would. I mean, I think both proposals are good proposals, and both would be beneficial for the neighborhood. So looking at this objectively, without getting any input from anyone, looking at this, I mean, it looks like appropriate use. That doesn't mean the daycare is not appropriate use. That's an appropriate use. Is dental office a better use? I don't see it much better. I think these two options are very comparable. In order for it to rezone, considering the input from the citizens, I mean, they have a strong desire to keep this as a daycare. I mean, I can relate to that as a mother with 3 young children. I mean, having a daycare really close by, that really is life-saving, like for young families. And I mean, I'm very sympathetic to our neighbors' desire, so I'm going to vote against on this project.
other thoughts,
So
comments?
I'll be the conflicted one.
Okay, that's okay.
So I think there are lots of reasons to approve or deny this. I mean, you could make a case for any of them, and I think that's what we're all doing here. The use of a dentist office or medical office, if you just compare them apples for apples, right? Just don't think about what the 30 years or 35 years for now, just if you just had it before you today. A dentist office is much less, you know, it's a third of the traffic, much less impact, no need for queuing, a lot safer because you have less cars, way less noise and disturbance, depending on how I happen to like the noise of children, so, but, you know, a lot of people might say no, the curmudgeon in you might say no. And on the other hand, these families have moved in with the thought and hope that a daycare for the last 30 years might be there. And it reminds me of the property, the Singh property, when people there wanted office retail for years and years and years. And what happened was, over time, no one could actually make it work. No developer could make that work. And I remember they finally came, we waited for years for that to be redeveloped. They finally came to us and said, listen, we have tried everything. We have brought everyone here. This property will not work as what it's zoned for. It just won't. And we approved that rezoning for something that many of the neighbors did not like, right? They wanted what was promised to them, but it just wouldn't work. So having said all that, we have a precedent for doing that. But I think it's very fair for us to say, what does the market bear here? And is it really possible for a daycare to fit in this spot? The information I got from staff, probably the same information you got, is that, you know, out of the 7 or 8 daycares that I got, all the ones built after the year 2000 have all been at least 1.5 acres, if not more. However, there are some, you know, as they said, KinderCare and some others that were built in 1988, 1990s that worked. So I would like to give it time to see, could a daycare be there? And I would be very open to having this come back, right? If that need could not be filled. And then saying, you know what, like Councilmember Lou said, you know, they're both good for this environment. We tried, we waited, we gave the time. This is really the next best opportunity.
Other thoughts?
Mr.
Yeah.
Earl?
Yeah, I mean, you know, candidly, I live nearby. I'm not going to reiterate all the things that have said. You know, I believe all of us had some element of conflict, or at least the challenge of looking at two very good ideas. I mean, that's the reality. I mean, emotionally, I like an independent dentist. I think the person has tried hard, and from experiences personally that I've had with these large-scale dentists that have fancy advertising all over the place, and they're shooting up, and they're very impersonal. They don't care. I kind of like the idea of a kind of an entrepreneurial small business owner. At the same time, I think the compelling argument that's kind of new to this that you brought up, Mayor, is the whole idea that maybe we should give it a chance because the land was not for sale. And the reality is that Wellington is one of our new opportunities for housing that we can bring small families in, and the demographics there have changed. And I think the opportunity for the daycare, we still need to give that the chance. The idea of old standards, new standards, one of the, I think the harsh realities that the neighborhood is going to have to think about is if you think you had problems with a two-story dentist, I don't see a child care being one story. That's changing. They're still rare, but we have one up on Kildare Farm Road, right nearby, and that's two-story. And I think part of that is property just isn't available that can meet some of those traditional old standards. So, you know, their challenge is going to have to be, how do you deal with the outdoor versus, and you know, on such a small property? And one of the ways you deal with that is to go up. So I'm not going to project that. I'm not going to even predict that. But I do think that if you look at greater good and compelling for a lot of reasons already stated, in a lot of those, they're a push. And sometimes I think you just have to respect neighborhoods. As we continue to grow, we're up to 180,000. It's every day we find our neighborhoods under siege for one reason or another. And we can use the cliches like a death of a thousand cuts. But once in a while, if all things are even or equal, as I believe they are, I think it's time that we listen to that voice. We leave it as it is, and we give the opportunity for a daycare to happen there. So I think that just kind of speaks to my point of view.
Other thoughts? Mr. Yerhoff?
I have to completely agree with Jack. I always ask the question for every rezoning, is the proposed use, the requested use, better for the town of Cary or better for the community than the existing? Is there something radically wrong with the existing zoning that needs to be changed? Or is there something especially fantastic about the new zoning that makes it, you know, triumph over the existing? And in this case, the requested zoning is not egregious in any way. It would, you know, it would be appropriate. But I don't see it being better for the community than the existing zoning. I don't see anything being wrong with the existing zoning. That's the old compelling reason. I just don't see it in this case. And when you combine that with hundreds of neighbors who live right there in the community standing in opposition to this, it becomes very difficult to vote for it, in my opinion. So I'm going to hope that a daycare comes forward sooner rather than later, and respectfully say no to this rezoning request tonight.
Okay, other comments?
my comments would just reiterate what everybody has said. You know, I don't find a problem with the proposal. I think the proposal is fine. You know, in the end, as Ed just said, we are asked to say between existing use and proposed use, which one is superior. So we turn to metrics that we're familiar with: traffic load, light, noise, buffers. And so we look at those sometimes, you know, most often we look at those as our qualifiers to say which one is going to be better. But sometimes it's not those factors that help you decide what's superior. It's just looking at it and saying, what would fit our community better? And in this case, I think the neighbors have made a compelling case that a daycare would meet their needs better at this point. So I'm inclined to give it a chance to be developed as a daycare or nursery, and we'll see what happens after that.
Okay. Other comments?
I mean, I think everything that probably needed to be said got said. This one was not easy. We've heard from a lot of citizens, gotten a lot of emails. I think at times it was tough to, you know, figure out who's genuine, who truly wants the daycare, and who's the NIMBYs. Your neighborhood's got both. You know, for the example, the people that came and spoke at the podium tonight, you know, it's true what they want. It's obvious what they want. You know, they're looking out, they want a daycare. I get it, you know. They got young kids or families moving into the neighborhood. Then when I hear things about, you know, needles in the yards and pedophiles and stuff, yeah, that's the NIMBY. So it's been hard. You know, I would agree that the dentist's use is a good use. At first, I thought this was great. This was, I think a lot of us referred to it as a slam dunk, easy peasy, you know? And then it started working its way through the process, and then we started hearing from folks, and then we started looking at things from maybe a different perspective. But I just want to say, with all that noise, some legitimate and some not so much, like I said, I do want to thank Ms. Haskin for coming here tonight. I've been sitting here for 14 years, and I don't know that I've ever heard somebody just so eloquently put it like it is, like you did, and encouraging everybody to just take a deep breath, work together, and be reasonable. And I think in today's world, we need a hell of a lot more reasonable. So I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for coming. I would have been prepared to vote for the dentist office tonight. I see them as very, very similar uses. I really do. I would agree with you what we typically look at during rezonings: traffic, noise, all those kinds of stuff. I kind of fall on Harold's side right now. Kids grown, gone. I don't know that I want a bunch of yappy ones across the street running around. But, you know, young families darn sure do. You know, so I kind of, when I look at, is it better than what can be built today, I kind of lean towards the dentist office just a little bit, you know? The information, you know, I was of the belief, and early on, this site's been available for 30 years, couldn't develop as, you know, to find out it wasn't for sale. Now, I will say, in today's world, when my phone is ringing off the hook wanting to know if I'm selling my house, I don't know how challenging that is, but it hasn't been for sale, you know, so that's fair. I'm willing to give it a little time. I'm not willing to give it a lot of time. If somebody else wants to do something comparable, or the dentist wants to come back and do something in a year or so, at that point, we've given it some time. I would encourage the residents, if you guys can find somebody to build or develop a daycare on that site, by all means. So I thank you all for being a part of the process. I respect you all for fighting for your neighborhood and your community. I really do. And hopefully the next time we see this piece of dirt, it's a lot better situation.
Yeah. Are we ready for a motion, or we have other comments? Mr. Smith, it's your district. Would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I hope I do this right. So
It's
since the proposal is to do this, then I'm suggesting that we deny this. So I'm going to make the motion to deny, and that we adopt the statement of inconsistency as attached to the online agenda for 21 REZ04 Wellington Park PDD Amendment Parcel C2, and reject rezoning ordinance 21 REZ 04.
There's a motion. I'm looking at the attorney. She's smiling through that
Did I do
mask.
that right?
Yes, very good.
Do
At
we
my
have
age,
a- Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second, discussion. All in favor of the motion to deny the request, please say aye.
Aye.
Those that are against the motion to deny, please say aye. Motion is unanimous to deny. Thank you. And thanks to all that participated in this process. And I echo Don's comments. Please continue to work on this, because if it comes back to us again, I don't think you're going to see the same result. So thank you for being a part of the process. All right, we're ready to move to a closed session, and I'll recognize Ms. Bush for the motion.
Okay, pursuant to GS 143-318-11A 1, 3, and 6, I move that we hold a closed session to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, conditions of employment, of an appointment, and conditions of initial employment of one or more individuals or prospective public officers or employees, to consult with the attorneys retained by or employed by the town in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorneys and the town, and to prevent the disclosure of information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to GS 143-318-10E.
There's a motion.
Second.
And a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and the council will now go into closed session.
And we have closed session in 100.
Closed session at 10035.
Oh, not here. But we got, okay.
We'll reconvene our council meeting. We have no further business this evening, so this meeting is adjourned.
This has been a production of Cary TV. Visit the Town of Cary's website at townofcary.org.